The desert night was cold, but inside the fortress the air was heavy with heat and greed. The collector sat on his throne, a cruel smile stretched across his thin lips. He was proud tonight, for he had captured something that no other being in the galaxy possessed. In the center of the hall stood a tall glass prison, glowing faintly with pale blue light. Inside, it was the rarest of creatures, the alien water girl. Her body shimmered like a river in sunlight, flowing gently, yet fragile. She looked young, her shape forming the outline of a girl, with hair like rippling streams and eyes that glowed like drops of crystal. She pressed her hands against the glass, leaving trails of liquid as if she were crying without tears. The collector raised his goblet and laughed. "Behold, the jewel of my collection, the last of her kind." The crowd of traders and hunters gasped, their greedy eyes fixed on her. They whispered to each other, speaking of prices, of power, of profit. The alien girl trembled, her glow dimming with every passing moment. Among the shadows at the edge of the hall stood a man, a human. He was not a guest, not a trader, not a hunter. He was a prisoner, forced into the fortress after being captured on a trade route. Chains hung from his wrists, yet his eyes were free, sharp, and filled with something the others lacked: compassion. When he saw the girl inside the glass, his heart tightened. She was suffering, slowly evaporating in the heat. Her body looked weaker than when she was first brought in. The collector did not care. He only boasted, "She will fetch more than a starship fleet, more than planets of gold." The human clenched his fists. He could not take his eyes off her. Every time she pressed her watery hand against the barrier, it was as if she were calling silently, begging for help. But who would help her in this place, surrounded by greed and cruelty? He lowered his gaze, hiding his thoughts. Yet his mind was racing. Something inside him whispered, "She does not belong here, and neither do you." The guards laughed loudly, boasting of how she had fought when first captured. They told stories of rivers rising against them, of storms crashing down on their ships. But in the end, chains and machines drained her power. Now she was nothing but a fading light in a glass box. The human's jaw tightened. He remembered the deserts of his own world, the thirst that burned when water was gone. He knew what it meant to need water more than life itself. Looking at her, he realized she was dying, slowly, painfully, and no one cared. As the night went on, the guests left one by one, their minds full of dreams of riches. The collector remained in his chamber, speaking to his guards. The human was dragged back to the prison cells deep below, but even there, in the darkness, he could not forget her. Her eyes haunted him, glowing like a reflection of stars and water. He lay on the stone floor, chains cutting into his skin, and whispered to himself, "She will die if no one helps her." The thought burned in his chest, stronger than hunger, stronger than fear. Above, the alien girl sat weakly inside the prison. Her body was turning thin, her edges fading into mist. She whispered in a voice like soft rain, "Water," but there was none. The guards ignored her, laughing, throwing dice, drinking. She pressed her forehead against the glass, her breath forming tiny droplets. Her heart was heavy, yet she felt something strange. When her eyes closed, she remembered the human's gaze, the way he looked at her, not like the others, not like a hunter. There had been no greed in his eyes, only sorrow. And maybe, just maybe, hope. Midnight fell, and the fortress became quiet. The desert winds howled outside, rattling the gates. The human opened his eyes in the cell, his mind restless. He had nothing, no weapons, no plan, only the burning thought that he could not let her die. He remembered the canteen they had taken from him, the few drops of water inside it. The guards laughed at him earlier, saying those drops were worthless in a place like this. But now, those drops might mean everything. He closed his eyes again, whispering in the dark, "If I cannot save her tomorrow, then no one will." In the hall above, the collector slept soundly, dreaming of gold and glory. The guards leaned against the walls, drunk and careless. And in the glass prison, the alien water girl whispered again, weaker this time. Water! Her body flickered like a candle flame ready to vanish. The desert outside roared, the stars shone coldly. And somewhere in the silence of the fortress, a human heart decided that tomorrow, everything would change. The sun rose over the desert, its light burning red across the endless sand. Inside the fortress, the collector's men stirred awake, laughing, sharpening their weapons, and preparing for another day of greed. The alien water girl was weaker than before, her glow faint, her hands trembling against the glass prison. Every movement looked painful, as if the heat itself was pulling her apart. Her eyes, however, still carried a strange light, a light that no chains could destroy. Far below, the human sat chained in the cold cell. The guards had thrown him down carelessly the night before, but sleep never came. His mind kept returning to her face, her shimmering hands pressed to the glass, her eyes begging without words. He could not forget them. When the heavy door opened and a guard shouted for him to rise, he obeyed silently. They dragged him back to the hall, forcing him to clean the floors while the collector prepared to show off his prize again. As the human worked, his eyes wandered. He caught sight of her again, and this time she was staring directly at him. Her eyes locked on his, glowing faintly like two drops of blue fire. For a moment, the hall seemed to vanish. The voices of the guards, the collector's laughter, all faded away. It was just her and him staring through the glass. Something passed between them. Not words, not sound, but a quiet plea. A voice that said, "Help me, please." The collector raised his arms proudly. "She is rare. She is mine. And soon she will be sold for more riches than you can imagine." The crowd clapped. Some cheered. Others whispered about the dangers of keeping such a creature alive. But the human could not listen. He was drowning in her gaze. Her eyes told a story of rivers and storms, of freedom and sorrow. And yet, beyond the suffering, there was trust. Trust in him, a stranger, a prisoner. He lowered his head quickly, afraid the guard would notice. But inside, his decision was already forming like fire in his chest. As the day dragged on, the guards mocked him, throwing scraps of food his way. They pushed him to the ground, laughed at his chains, and warned him never to look at the treasure again. But even in pain, he lifted his eyes when no one was watching. Every time he did, she was still looking at him. He wondered if she could hear his thoughts, if she could feel his guilt at being powerless. But when he whispered softly, "I will not let you die," her eyes seemed to shine brighter, as if she had heard. At night, the hall grew quiet again. The collector locked the glass prison with heavy iron seals. Guards remained, playing dice, drinking, their laughter filling the silence. The human was chained against the wall near the edge of the hall, forced to sleep there for the night. But sleep never came. He kept glancing at her. She was sitting weakly inside the glass, her hands resting against the barrier, her breathing shallow. Her eyes flickered open and met his again. In that moment, he felt something powerful, something unshakable. She was not just asking for water, she was asking for him. The fortress seemed alive with whispers that night. The desert wind howled through cracks in the walls. The guards cursed as the dice betrayed them. The collector dreamed of wealth in his chambers above. But in the hall, between a human prisoner and a dying alien girl, a silent promise was born. A promise carried only through eyes. He would risk his life, his last drop, everything to free her. As midnight deepened, her glow grew weaker. Her body seemed to fade like mist, her voice barely rising above the wind. "Water," she whispered again. The guards ignored her, laughing at their games. But the human heard. He leaned forward, straining against his chains, whispering back though she could not hear. "I have water, just a little. I will give it to you, I swear." Her eyes closed gently, yet a faint smile touched her shimmering lips. She believed him. Even in her weakness, even in her pain, she trusted him. The human leaned back against the wall, his chains biting into his wrists. His mind raced, searching for a way. The locks, the guards, the alarms. Every path seemed impossible. But he no longer cared about impossibility. He only cared about the promise he had just made with his eyes. And promises, once made, could not be broken. The desert wind howled louder, rattling the glass. The girl stirred faintly, opening her eyes once more. And in the silence of the fortress, prisoner and alien stared at each other. Two souls from different worlds, bound not by chains, but by hope. Hope that tomorrow the glass would break and freedom would flow like water. The fortress slept under the heavy desert night, but the human did not sleep. He sat in chains, his eyes fixed on the glowing glass prison in the center of the hall. The alien water girl lay weak inside, her body almost transparent, like a dying flame in the wind. Her eyes closed and opened slowly, fighting against the darkness that pulled her down. The human knew if he waited any longer, she would not survive. He remembered her whispered voice, soft like rain, asking for water. He remembered the promise he had made with his eyes. That promise was now a fire burning inside him, a fire that no chains could hold. He studied the hall carefully, every detail, every sound, every movement. The guards were half asleep, their heads heavy with wine, their dice scattered on the table. The collector was gone, resting in his chamber above, dreaming of riches. It was the perfect time, it was also the most dangerous. The human pulled at his chains, slowly, testing their strength. His wrists burned, but he did not stop. He leaned closer to the wall, noticing a crack where the iron met the stone. If he twisted his arm at the right angle, the chain shifted just slightly, not free yet, but loose enough to give him hope. He worked in silence, moving little by little, while his eyes kept returning to her. The girl stirred inside the glass, lifting her head weakly, her eyes meeting his once more. He whispered so softly no one could hear, "Hold on, I will come." The hours dragged slowly, each second heavy as stone. The guards snored louder. One even dropped his cup to the floor without waking. The human finally felt the chain snap against the crack. Pain shot through his arm, but the iron broke loose from the wall. His hands were still bound together, but at least he could move. He crouched low, his heart pounding. The hall was vast, the glass prison glowing at the center like a beacon. He needed keys, he needed water, and most of all, he needed courage. On the table near the guards, the keys to the cells lay in plain sight. The human's eyes narrowed, his body tense. He crept forward step by step, his bare feet silent on the cold stone. Every breath sounded too loud in his ears, every heartbeat like a drum. He reached the table, his fingers brushing the iron keys. A guard stirred, muttering in his sleep. The human froze, not daring to move, but the guard only rolled over and continued snoring. With shaking hands, the human took the keys and hid them inside his torn shirt. He moved back toward the shadows, his body pressed low. The glass prison shimmered softly, the alien girl's face pale and weak. Her eyes fluttered open, and when she saw him holding the keys, a faint spark lit within her. Her lips moved silently, forming words only he could imagine: freedom. The human nodded once, whispering, "Tonight." But water. He could not forget the water. He searched the hall quickly, his eyes falling on a jug near the guard's table. It was half full, left behind after their drunken games. If he could reach it, maybe he could keep her alive long enough to escape. He slid forward again, his hand stretching for the jug. The wood creaked under his touch, and one of the guards shifted. The human froze, sweat running down his neck. The guard snorted, turned away, and fell back into sleep. The human lifted the jug carefully, holding it close. Every drop inside it now felt like treasure. He returned to the shadows, breathing hard. The keys, the water, the chance, he had them all. But the glass prison was more than just a cage. Heavy chains and glowing seals locked it tight, humming with strange energy. He had seen the collector press symbols on the locks earlier, strange alien runes that opened the glass. Without the right touch, the prison would never break. The human's mind raced. He had to watch, he had to learn, he had to act at the right moment. The girl stirred again, pressing her hand weakly against the glass. Her body flickered like mist in sunlight, but her eyes never left him. He lifted the jug of water slightly, showing her. She closed her eyes, and a tear, if it was a tear, slid down her watery cheek. It was not sorrow, but trust. The trust that he would keep his promise. The night dragged into silence, the desert wind rattling the fortress walls. The human crouched in the shadows, waiting, planning, his body tense, but his heart unshaken. He had no weapons, no strength, no allies, only keys, water, and his will. But sometimes, will was stronger than armies. He whispered to himself again, as if carving the words into stone. Tomorrow we escape. And in her prison of glass and chains, the alien water girl closed her eyes and whispered faintly, "Yes." The fortress was silent under the desert moon. The guards snored at their posts. The collector slept in his chamber above, and the alien water girl lay weak in her glowing glass prison. The human crouched in the shadows, the stolen keys pressed against his chest, the stolen jug of water heavy in his hands, his breath slow and steady. He knew this was the moment. There would never be another. He crept forward, each step a whisper, each heartbeat loud as thunder in his ears. The guards stirred in their sleep. One rolled over, another muttered, but none woke. The human reached the glass prison, his chains rattling softly as he knelt beside it. The girl lifted her head weakly, her eyes glowing faintly, and when she saw the keys in his hand, she pressed her palm against the glass. He whispered, "I will free you," and her trembling lips formed the word, "Yes." The lock was covered in strange symbols, glowing faint blue. The human studied them, his mind racing. He had seen the collector press certain runes before. He tried to remember the order. His fingers trembled as he touched the first symbol. The glass hummed, the glow brightened, but no alarm sounded. He pressed the second, then the third, and with a hiss the chains around the prison released. The glass door opened slowly, and a cool rush of air spilled out, carrying with it the scent of rain. The alien girl staggered forward, her body weak, her steps uncertain. The human caught her before she fell, her form soft and cool in his arms. He whispered, "Drink," and poured the jug of water against her lips. She drank greedily, her glow strengthening slightly, though still dim. She looked up at him, eyes filled with gratitude and fear. But before he could speak, a sound cut the silence. A guard dropped his cup, eyes widening as he saw the open prison. "Alarm!" he shouted, his voice cracking through the hall like fire. The fortress roared to life, bells clanged, horns blared, boots thundered against stone. The collector's angry voice echoed from above, "Do not let them escape." The human grabbed the girl's hand, her watery fingers cool and trembling in his grip. Together they ran, chains clinking against his wrists, bare feet pounding on the cold floor. Arrows hissed through the air, blasters fired, sparks lit the hall. The girl raised her hand weakly, a small wave of water rising from her palm, enough to block the first shots. But her strength was low, she could not hold it for long. The human pulled her through the corridors, turning sharply into narrow passages he had studied in his nights of captivity. The fortress was a maze, but he knew the way to the gate. The guards shouted behind them, their torches casting long shadows on the walls. They burst into a courtyard, the desert night wide above them. The stars shone cold, the sand stretched endless beyond the walls. But the gates were shut, heavy in iron, guarded by men with blades. The human's heart pounded. There was no time. He turned to the girl, whispering, "Can you?" She closed her eyes, gathering the last of her power. Her body glowed brighter, her arms lifted, and from her form poured a sudden flood. A wave crashed forward, slamming into the guards, scattering them like leaves in a storm. The gates groaned and cracked, the iron bending under the force. "Run!" she gasped, her glow fading again. The human pulled her through the broken gates, stumbling into the sand. The desert wind hit them, sharp and dry, carrying the taste of freedom. But the chase was not over. Behind them, the collector shouted, his voice filled with rage. Bring them back alive. Do not let them escape into the dunes. Dozens of men poured from the fortress, their torches burning like angry stars. The human and the alien girl ran into the desert, their shadows stretching long under the moon. The sand was deep, every step heavy, the girl weak and fading. He carried her when she stumbled, his arms burning with effort, but he never let her go. The torches behind them grew closer, shouts carried by the wind, arrows whistled past. Still he pushed forward, whispering, "Hold on, just a little longer, freedom is near." The desert stretched endless, the fortress shrinking behind them. But the hunters were fast, their mounts racing across the dunes. The human knew they could not outrun them forever. He looked at the girl, her eyes dim, her body flickering like mist. She whispered, "Do not stop, we must keep going." He nodded, his breath ragged, his legs heavy, but his will was unbroken. The chase tore across the night, sand flying beneath their feet, the desert echoing with shouts and horns. The collector himself rode at the front, his eyes burning with fury. "You cannot hide, human," he roared. "She is mine." But the human only tightened his grip on her hand and whispered back, "Not anymore." The desert wind howled, the stars glimmered coldly, the torches blazed closer. And in the middle of it all, a human and a dying alien girl ran together. Not for riches, not for power, but for freedom. The chase had begun, and it would not end until one of them fell. The desert night stretched endless. The human ran with the alien girl at his side, his breath burning in his chest, his legs heavy, yet he did not stop. Behind them, the torches of the collector's men lit the dunes like fire, their shouts growing louder, their arrows hissing through the night air. The girl stumbled, her glowing form flickering like mist, her body weak and fading with every step. He caught her before she fell, holding her close, whispering, "Stay with me, please." Her eyes opened faintly, glowing dim blue, her voice like a drop of rain. "I cannot last." He looked ahead. The desert was endless, nothing but sand and stars. No water, no shelter, no escape. The hunters closed in fast, the sound of hooves and boots crashing against the sand. The human's heart pounded, his body screamed to stop, but he carried her, stumbling forward. He whispered again, "I promised you I will not let you die." The girl's body grew lighter in his arms, not from strength but from weakness. Her watery form was thinning, parts of her turning into faint mist that drifted away in the desert wind. She whispered, "Water, even a drop." The human froze, his eyes wide. His canteen, the old leather flask the guards had thrown aside as useless, still hung at his belt. He grabbed it with shaking hands, opening the cap. Inside, he knew, only a few drops remained, the last of it, the water of his own survival. The hunters were closer now, their torches like angry stars on the horizon. The collector's voice carried across the dunes, cruel and sharp. "She is mine. Human, you cannot save her." But the human did not listen. He knelt in the sand, holding her trembling form, her glowing eyes almost gone, her lips dry and cracked like breaking glass. He tilted the canteen, and with great care let the last drops fall onto her lips. The desert seemed to pause, the wind holding its breath. The drops touched her mouth, sinking into her form, glowing faintly like sparks on the surface of a river. She gasped, her body rippling, her glow flickering brighter for a moment. Her eyes opened wide, filled with light again. She looked at him, her voice soft but clear. "You gave me your last drop." He smiled faintly, though his throat burned with thirst. "It was never mine. It was always meant for you." She clung to him weakly, her body regaining shape but still fragile. He lifted her again, standing on trembling legs. The hunters were almost upon them, arrows whistling past, blades flashing in the torchlight. He whispered, "We keep going," and carried her forward into the dunes. Her glow was faint but alive, her eyes brighter than before. Every step he took was agony, but her hand pressed against his chest gave him strength. The desert wind roared louder, whipping sand into their faces. The collector rode at the front of his men, his eyes blazing with rage. "Kill the human if you must," he shouted, "but bring me the girl alive." The human tightened his grip on her, whispering, "They will never take you again." She looked at him, her voice stronger now. "Why do you risk everything for me?" He answered simply, his voice steady despite his weakness. "Because no one else would." The girl's glow pulsed faintly, like a river returning after drought. She touched his cheek, her fingers cool and wet. "Then I will not let you die either." Her body shimmered, drawing power from the last drops he had given her. A faint ripple of water rose around them, swirling like a shield. The hunters fired arrows, but the watery barrier deflected them, splashing harmlessly into the sand. The human's heart filled with hope, small but unbreakable. For the first time, he felt the chase was not only about running, but about surviving. Still, the desert was merciless. The water she gained from his last gift was not enough to restore her strength fully. Her glow flickered, her body trembled, and she leaned against him, whispering, "I need more, or I will fade again." He held her close, whispering back, "Then we find more. We will find it together." His throat ached, his body was weak, but his will was stronger than stone. The hunters closed in once more, the torches bright against the dark dunes. But the human no longer felt fear. He had given his last drop, his last hope, and yet in doing so he had found something greater. The bond between him and the alien water girl was no longer fragile. It was carved in sacrifice. As long as he stood, as long as he carried her, they would not take her. The desert howled. The stars burned cold above. The torches drew closer like a wall of fire. And in the center of it all, a human with no water and no strength carried an alien girl, glowing faintly from the last gift he had given. He stumbled forward, whispering the same words again and again like a prayer. "Stay alive, stay with me, stay alive." And she, though weak, whispered back with a voice of rain, "I will." The desert night stretched wide and endless. The stars glimmered like cold fire above, and the sand whispered under every step the human took. He carried the alien water girl in his arms, his throat burning with thirst, his body trembling from exhaustion, but his spirit unbroken. Behind them, the collector's men still hunted, their torches glowing like angry stars moving across the dunes. Yet for the first time, the girl's glow was steady, faint but alive, her body slowly regaining shape after his sacrifice. She looked up at him, her eyes shimmering blue, her voice soft like rippling water. "You gave me your last drop." He nodded, his voice hoarse. "I told you I would not let you die." Her hand rested against his chest, cool and gentle. "No one has ever done this for me. No one has ever cared." The human smiled faintly, though his lips were dry and cracked. Then they were fools. They stopped for a moment at the crest of a dune, the desert wind whipping against them. He set her down gently, his chest heaving, his chains rattling softly. She knelt in the sand, her body glowing faintly brighter, her form steadying with every breath. She touched the sand beside her and whispered, her voice like a prayer. Tiny droplets rose from the ground, gathering around her fingers. It was not much, just a faint shimmer, but it was enough to prove her strength was returning. The human watched in awe, his heart lifting. "You still have power," he whispered. She looked at him with a small smile. "Because of you." Her glow reflected in his eyes, and for a moment the desert, the chase, the hunters, all of it faded away. There was only the bond between them, a bond born of sacrifice and trust. Two souls from different worlds, yet closer than anyone else had ever been. But the silence did not last. A horn blared in the distance. The hunters were closing in. The girl's smile faded, her glow trembling. "They will not stop. They will chase us until the end." The human nodded, his voice steady. "Then we will not stop either." She looked at him, Her eyes filled with something deeper than fear, something he could not name. "Why do you fight for me?" she asked softly. "You could have escaped alone. You could have saved yourself." He shook his head, his voice strong. "Escape without you would not be freedom. It would be another kind of prison." Her eyes shimmered with emotion. Her hand reached for his, and their fingers intertwined. Cool water meeting warm flesh. In that moment, they were no longer prisoner and captive, no longer human and alien. They were simply two lives bound together by a choice. The desert wind howled around them, carrying the sound of the hunter's approach, but their bond stood unshaken. She closed her eyes, concentrating. Her body glowed brighter, her voice rising like the sound of rain on stone. "I will protect you, as you protected me." The air around them shimmered, droplets forming in the desert air, swirling into a faint shield. The human watched in amazement as water formed where none should exist. He whispered, "You are stronger than I imagined." She opened her eyes, her glow fierce. "Not strong alone, strong because of you." The bond between them was no longer fragile, no longer uncertain. It was carved in sacrifice, shaped in trust, and sealed by the last drop he had given. The hunters could take his life, the desert could take his body, but they could not take the bond they had built. The girl leaned closer, her voice soft but unshakable. "Whatever happens, I will not let you fall alone." And he answered without hesitation, "Nor will I let them take you again." The desert lights grew brighter, the hunters' shouts carried by the wind. The collector's voice roared above them, furious and cruel. "You cannot run forever. She is mine." But the human only tightened his grip on her hand and whispered, "You are free." She looked at him, her eyes glowing with fierce light, and for the first time she smiled with strength, not weakness. "Together," she whispered, "we will make it." The wind howled louder. The torches grew closer. The chase thundered across the dunes. But in the heart of the desert, in the silence between two breaths, a bond stronger than chains, stronger than greed, stronger than death itself was born. And that bond would soon face its greatest test. The desert shook with thunder, not from the sky, but from the army that stormed across the dunes. The collector rode at the front on a great black beast, his eyes glowing with fury, his voice sharp as steel. "Do not fail me. Bring the girl alive. The human I want broken." His soldiers roared in answer, their torches blazing, their weapons raised. The chase was over. The hunt had reached its end. At the crest of a dune, the human stood, his body trembling from thirst, his lips dry, his arms heavy from carrying her. Beside him, the alien water girl rose, her glow faint but steady, her eyes burning like blue fire. They were cornered, nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. The desert stretched endless behind them, but the hunters filled the horizon ahead. The human gripped her hand, whispering, "We face them together." She nodded, her watery hair flowing like a river in the wind. "Together." The collector raised his hand. "Seize them." The soldiers charged, their blades flashing, their arrows slicing through the night. The human stepped forward, chains rattling at his wrists, but his eyes fierce. He knew he had nothing left, no water, no weapon, no strength. But he also knew he had something greater. The bond between them, carved by sacrifice, sealed by his last drop. He whispered to her, "Take my strength, whatever remains, it is yours." The alien girl looked at him, her eyes wide with shock. "You have given me everything already," she whispered. "Your last water, your life, your hope." But he shook his head, his voice steady. "Not everything. Take my will, take my heart, it belongs to you now." Tears shimmered in her glowing eyes. Her body rippled like a river. She leaned against him, pressing her forehead to his, whispering, "Then I will give it back 1,000 times over." She closed her eyes, her body glowing brighter, her form surging with light. The human staggered, but did not fall, his hands still gripping hers, his will flowing into her. Her glow became a storm, her watery body rising high like a wave against the stars. The collector's men froze, their torches flickering, their charge faltering. The collector screamed, "Fools! She is weak. Take her." But even his voice trembled with fear. The wave crashed forward, a tide born from sacrifice and bond. Water poured from her like an ocean breaking free, sweeping across the dunes. The soldiers were thrown aside, their torches drowned, their weapons lost in the flood. The collector roared in rage, raising his blade, but the storm swallowed him too. His cries vanished under the roar of the tide. The desert was no longer dry, no longer silent. For a moment it became a sea, shining under the stars, flowing with power. At the heart of the storm stood the girl, her body glowing brighter than ever, her voice carrying like thunder and rain. "You tried to break me, you tried to own me, but I am free," and he gave me that freedom. The storm slowly calmed, the water sinking into the thirsty sand. The soldiers were gone, their torches drowned, their master defeated. Only the human and the girl remained on the quiet dune, the desert now still. She turned to him, her glow soft but radiant, her eyes filled with light. "You gave me your last drop," she whispered, "and from it I gave you an ocean." The human fell to his knees, his body weak, his lips parched. But her hands lifted him, her touch cool and gentle, her form shimmering with strength. She leaned close, whispering, "You will not die of thirst, not while I live." And from her palm, a stream of clear water flowed, pure and endless. He drank, his body trembling, his heart filled with awe. He looked at her, his voice soft. "You saved me." But she shook her head, her eyes glowing. "No, you saved me first." The desert stretched endless around them, but it no longer felt empty. For where once there had been only silence and death, now there was life and bond. A human who gave his last drop, and an alien who became his ocean. Together they walked into the horizon, not as prisoner and captive, not as human and alien, but as two souls bound forever by sacrifice, by trust, by love. The stars watched silently. The desert winds carried their steps. And somewhere deep in the universe, the story of a human who gave everything for a dying girl was born. A story that would not be forgotten. A story of humanity's last gift.